Also today, more House debate on the House Speaker and the Conservative privilege motion about Greg Fergus's video message at an Ontario Liberal convention. That motion would see the Procedure Committee report back by next Thursday on what should happen. Let's hear now from MPs on this. We have Liberal Kevin Lamoureux, Conservative Chris Warkentin, and the NDP's Daniel Blaikie. Welcome to all three of you. Mr. Lamoureux, the amendment vote on that December 14th deadline was unanimous today. Why are you and other Liberals looking for the committee to deal with this before Christmas?
Well, at the end of the day, we look at the situation and wanting to be able to see it resolved. And as the motion itself indicates, they would like to be able to see it, the issue remedied by the Procedures and House Affairs Committee. Having said that, I am somewhat concerned in the sense that this should be an apolitical, let's leave the partisanship to the side and allow PROC to come up with a remedy to the situation. Based on yesterday's debate inside the chamber, I'm concerned that the Conservative Party has already drawn conclusions where you have some members saying that the Speaker should be resigning. And I hope that that attitude doesn't carry over to the PROC, because we're asking PROC to come up with the ultimate remedy for the situation.
Right, and Mr. Warkentin, your party has demanded Mr. Fergus's resignation before this committee would even meet. So is there anything short of resignation that you're prepared to accept?
No, there's not. Quite frankly, the Speaker came out after the first partisan speech that he gave and broke convention, having a speech at the Ontario Liberal Convention as the Speaker in his robes, filmed in his Speaker's office, taking a very partisan perspective in that message. And the Speaker came out shortly after and said, please, you know, he was pleading with parliamentarians to allow him to continue on as Speaker. He said, my future actions will demonstrate that I've learned from this. Then he raced down to Washington on the taxpayer's dime and had another partisan speech where he again talked about his liberal, you know, all of his liberal connections. It's unprecedented that we have a Speaker that would do this once, never mind twice. Quite frankly, I'm surprised that there isn't more calls for his resignation, but right now it is the Conservative Party. The Bloc called for the resignation even before we did. This is nearly half of the House of Commons who is currently calling for the Speaker to resign. This is untenable. The Speaker cannot continue in this situation.
Okay, well, let me bring you in, Mr. Blaikie, because you do have the Conservatives and the Bloc calling for Mr. Fergus to resign. Why hasn't the NDP taken that step yet?
Well, this certainly is a serious situation, and so what we're doing, the Conservatives chose to raise this as a point of privilege in the House. It was found that there was a prima facie case. It's going to the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, so we're going to let this process play out. We were the first to call for Speaker Rota's resignation. That was something that embarrassed Canada on the international stage and hurt, frankly, a lot of Canadians whose families had experience with the Holocaust in the Second World War. So that was something where there were international repercussions, where people at home were really hurting. These charges are very serious of partisanship in respect of Mr. Fergus, and we think it's appropriate that the Procedure and House Affairs take a very good look at this. And the fact that two parties already have called for his resignation is also something serious, but I'm not going to prejudge what members of the Procedure and House Affairs Committee will have the opportunity, presumably, to hear from Mr. Fergus, I would imagine, and to hear more about some of the claims that he's made about, you know, what the understanding was about how the video would be used and whatnot. But these are certainly very serious allegations that have been made. I don't think it's a good look for the Speaker to be appearing in partisan contexts like this. It's not helpful. And so we'll see what the Procedure and House Affairs Committee ultimately has to say. But it's important that that process happen, and it's important that it happens swiftly.
Okay, Mr. Lamoureux, you've just heard Conservatives and the NDP talking about Mr. Fergus and that video. How will he be able to build trust with parties that want him to step down if indeed he remains in the role? Is there actually a way forward for him to continue regardless of what actually comes out of the Procedure Committee on this question of privilege?
Well, I think that what's important here as we go over the next number of days is there has to be a sense of fairness to the process. And that's why it's so critically important when you talk about the Speaker's office or the House of Commons. This is like an institution, and there has to be that sense of fairness. And that's why during the debate yesterday, I emphasized how important it is that we leave politics outside the door and allow PROC to do what it can do in terms of looking at possible remedies. That includes having a discussion with the Speaker, maybe talking to some or inviting other former speakers to be able to make presentations. I don't think that we should be trying to be passing a judgment, what I would suggest to you is prematurely, before we really know and appreciate all the facts at hand. And as I say, I think Canadians have a sense of wanting to see fairness also applied.
Well, Mr. Warkentin, I'll let you reply to that, because once again, you've said that Conservatives want resignation. So if there are hearings over the next week with the procedure committee, what are you actually going to be looking for here?
Well, I think it's really hilarious what Kevin just said. He said that members of Parliament should not engage in partisanship. Well, that is exactly what has brought us here, is we have a Speaker, the only member of Parliament that is actually forbidden from engaging in partisanship. He went out and proactively, in his Speaker's robes, in a video from the Speaker's office, engaged in extreme partisanship. That's what brought us here. And so for the Speaker, who is to serve as the referee of all members of Parliament, who should have trust of all members of Parliament, that in that he would not, that he will not, as Speaker, engage in partisanship, is now that we have the Liberal Party saying that nobody should engage in partisanship. We should all set that aside and judge the Speaker for I'm not sure what. It's ridiculous. It's laughable. Quite frankly, it's getting to the point where this is entirely a farce. The Liberal Party position is increasingly a comedy routine. And frankly, I think that Canadians have great reason to be concerned about where the Liberal Party is standing on this situation. It demonstrates how unserious they are about the situation that we find ourselves in.
Okay, we just have a moment left, so I want to give the last word to Mr. Blaikie. You've already talked about the fact that your party is looking to the procedure committee to see more evidence, more information about Mr. Fergus's decision. So can you be a bit more specific about what extra evidence you're looking to see and how that will affect whether you and your caucus colleagues feel that you're actually going to be able to trust Mr. Fergus as an impartial Speaker going forward?
Well, I won't be the NDP member on the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, so I'm going to leave that to my colleague who sits on the committee to get a sense of what kind of evidence they think is appropriate to look at and how they're going to conduct those proceedings. What I would say that I don't think has been talked a lot about so far, I'm very glad to have Chris here on the panel today. I think he's done a good job of representing the Conservative position. I don't think that this debate has helped by having Mr. Scheer be the point person on this for the Conservatives. One of the until Mr. Scheer, there was a long-standing and unbroken tradition of speakers not getting into partisan politics after being Speaker. He subsequently ran for leader of a political party, and now he's the House Leader, which is the partisan point person for the Conservatives in the House of Commons. And they've been mobilizing his experience in the Speaker's office in order to try and make their points. I don't think that has been helpful in terms of the debate, which is why I'm glad to see a guy like Chris here who has not been Speaker himself, and it's fair game. It's fair game for him to play that partisan role. I really think that when Mr. Scheer is talking about the dignity of the office of Speaker, he should be reflecting on the nature of his own career.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks to all three of you tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.